Hey folks. So I'm going to do another video today on Metroidvanias in a very different vein from my last one, but following up um, from my thoughts on that, or thinking more on that, on what came out of that for me anyway. Um, so the last one was more sort of on, so after playing Animal Well, what that kind of led me to in terms of having a non-combat Metroidvania like that, um, and thinking about um, I was partway through playing the game, and so I was thinking about structure and all of that kind of thing. I think, as it turns out, but like by the end, so I had seen someone do a post basically on what some people are calling Metroidvanias, which is sort of this idea of, so they did a post, and put in a bunch of like title screens from games, and so it was like Animal Well, Hypnospace Outlaw, The Witness, Void Stranger, some other one that I can't remember, maybe one or two other ones. Um, and basically the post was like, so what do we call these games now? Like, what do these have in common? And other people have sort of called games with that concept Metroidvanias. Or Outer Wilds is the other important one. And Rainworld. And so I don't know how, if all of those do really fit together, or if this person, I mean, the discussion that was going on basically was that what makes these all fit together, from my understanding anyway, is that they're these Metroidvania games, which are basically, when Jonathan Blow was, before he brought out The Witness, I remember he did a video sort of showing the first 20 minutes or so of it, and that's when it really struck me, like the philosophy behind it, which I loved, and which, these kind of subsequent games, whether influenced by The Witness or not, I don't know, have do represent that philosophy as well, and which is, in the simplest terms of like, you don't collect things, you collect information. So instead of making the player go around and collect, like in a classic Metroidvania, it's like you need to collect this power up to get through this, to use this ability to get through this section or whatever. Which in some ways is like a glorified, like, get the key to open the door. If you break it down in a game design sense, it's much more than that. But you can look at it through a particular lens and say that structurally it's not much more than that. It just gives you more dynamics in that. It's like a more dynamic key in a way. Which again is not to, I love Metroidvanias, and I love that power up kind of structure. So anyway, the Metroidvania thing is like going, okay, instead of, and it's not specific to Metroidvanias either. Like, it's not specific to like saying that that's a structural problem that we need to fix. You could apply this idea to anything. So like, point and click adventures where it's all about collecting inventory items, etc. Or whatever else where it's about collecting the thing that you need to do the thing. So this philosophy is more like, what is being collected is in the player's mind, right? So it's really about information. And so obviously, if you played The Witness, you know that it's like all about that. It kind of like gently leads you into what the interactions are first, and then it presents you with a puzzle that, if you've never played the game before, you don't know how to solve. And so at that point, you either give up on the game, or you go, okay, I need to go and find more information. And then instead of collecting keys or collecting power-ups, you are collecting information, and then you can go back and solve that first kind of bunker puzzle, and then you've got the gist of how the rest of the game unfolds. And so I still haven't played Outer Wilds. I really need to, but as far as I understand from all the discussions I've seen about that it's the same gist, is that like you have everything that you need, but you don't have the information to know that you have those tools at your disposal, basically. So because I saw Animal Well in this kind of category, I assumed, because I know a lot about The Witness and because I've read and watched a lot about Outer Wilds and that kind of thing, I was like, oh, that's going to be interesting to see how, because you can look at Animal Well and see that it's a more traditional 2D Metroidvania, in a cave like structure. But after playing through it all, it's not a Metroidvania at all. It's a much more traditional Metroidvania than I was expecting. It's literally, you can't do this thing until you get this specific power up. I mean, I know there's a whole other puzzle layer. Like, you can complete the game and then there's a whole other puzzle layer. So I don't know if that is just something that changes the game completely. But yeah, certainly in terms of that, like with Tunic, Tunic was another one in that list as well, I think. Honest, Tunic was another one that people suggested was in that list as well. So like with Tunic, if you know how the teleport pads work, then right at the start of the game, you can use a teleport pad and it changes the whole way that you're going to progress through the game. But as far as I could tell, and I could be wrong, but Animal Well isn't like that. Or it is, and that's in a completely secret way, but yeah, I don't know. Does that, but obviously, but the game is still built primarily around doing it in a traditional way, even if there's a secret way to not do it in the traditional Metroidvania structure way. Anyway, so the larger point here is that all got me thinking about what is powerfully resonant about Metroidvania structures. And I think especially because after my last video, I was kind of left with this feeling of like, I need to say more, because it doesn't feel right just to do something that feels kind of like a criticism or an undermining of something that I really strongly believe has a great resonance. So I thought, well, what is the resonance then? Like, what is the power and the significance of the Metroidvania structure? And what that is for me. And I would imagine for a lot of people as well, whether consciously or unconsciously, is like I kind of landed on two key things, or sort of two things that are sort of part of the same thing. And that is, firstly, this idea of whether or not a Metroidvania is set underground, it generally has this enclosed labyrinth thing. So it's generally got this sort of delving into the subconscious feeling to it. So I think that's the first sort of key thing, is feeling like you're going down into a labyrinth of the unconscious and sort of getting to explore your own subconscious in quite a dreamlike way. And I always remember this thing of so Janet Murray, who's who's a scholar, and she wrote the great book Hamlet on the Holodeck. Um, there's some discussion, it was in some video, like some panel discussion, Metroidvanias come up, and there's someone explains some aspect of it to her, and she's like, oh, it's like the Labyrinth game. And I really love that, because it's both like incredibly reductive, but also 100% true. Like, Metroidvanias are just labyrinths, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It can be bad for a Metroidvania it is a bad one, but it's like something to be aware of as someone who's making one of those games, and as a player, that are you transcending the idea that, or are you transcending the fact that this is just a labyrinth? Or otherwise, are you treating your players, or as a player, are you being treated like a rat that's running through a maze doing menial tasks? Because you definitely don't want to be treating your players like that. And as a player, you don't want to be feeling like that. But because it's a structure that's been so crystallized in the game industry for such a long time now, we know the formula. Like, collectively as game designers around the world, we know the formula, and we know how to apply the formula of go here, get this, use this to do this, unlock the backtrack so that you can shortcut from this to this, blah, 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 blah. And that is a very simple formula. Once it's known and once it's out there. So I think it's important to be careful not to fall into that trap, and that, like, it's also okay to sort of be reductive sometimes, as long as you can put it back together into a bigger context as well. You can sort of reduce it down to, like, yeah, it is just a labyrinth, so how can we make it more than that? So that's one of the things, is like this delving into the subconscious. And so I'm a big fan of Joseph Campbell and The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And so I was also thinking, Joseph Campbell talks a lot in that book about water often being this universal symbol for delving into the subconscious. So like when you have sort of mythological stories and the hero has to go underwater, or you have dreams about delving underwater or whatever, that generally represents going into the unconscious. And so I started thinking about if going into this labyrinth of the unconscious is part of what gives Metroidvanias this enduring resonance, then what else what are the other aspects of the hero's journey? So I'm not going to go into like the Joseph Campbell hero's journey wheel, but if you don't know that, and there's lots of different variations on it as well, it's definitely a fun rabbit hole to dive down and explore that. There's like a classic sort of diagram that he has in his book about where you start your journey and the phases of the journey that you get taken on, and the monomyth about how that appears in all stories and all mythologies across all human history, which is just such an incredible idea. He's a really amazing guy to delve into. But anyway, I'm sure plenty of you out there are aware of Joseph Campbell. He's talked about all the time. And there's some interesting sort of simplifications and variations, like Dan Harmon's story wheel. If you're a Community or a Rick and Morty fan, I think Dan Harmon is just one of the best minds out there in terms of like TV writing, of being able to do that at just sometimes like take you on this journey in just in blinding speed of, especially in Rick and Morty. It's like, how did so many things happen so fast? But because he's just doing acrobatic things with that hero's journey structure. So anyway, so I was reflecting on that, and sort of into my memory of all the Metroidvanias that I've played, I don't have a strong sense of any of the stories of them. Like as in, none of those stories have stayed with me. I couldn't even really tell you. And it's not that I'm saying that those games need stronger narratives. That's not what I'm saying at all. And that's part of the interesting thought, the interesting conclusion that I sort of came to, is that, okay, if it's not if I'm not remembering the stories, if they didn't leave a strong impression on me, but I'm also not feeling like the stories were missing or that they needed to be stronger, then why is that? And so I was thinking about, well, what is the hero's journey of progressing through, say Super Metroid or Axiom Verge or Symphony of the Night or whatever else. And I thought, there obviously is a whole arc. But what I think is more interesting, and part of the reason why I think a Metroidvania can be compelling, even if you can play through it and not even know what the whole arc was, like what's Samus trying to do again? I think the reason that it can resonate anyway and get away with whatever that thing is, like whatever story weakness is there, is because it works on basically multiple miniature heroes' journeys. And that's basically the second point that I was trying to get to. So the first point being that Metroidvanias are a labyrinthine depth into the subconscious, a labyrinthine dive into the subconscious. And the second point being that they tend to be, the Metroidvania structure tends to put the focus on multiple heroes' journeys rather than one big significant one. And of course, there is always one big significant one in any structure, in any piece of fiction, right? But it's more the point that the focus is on the smaller ones. And what I mean by that is just the thing of, here is something that I can't get past. So that becomes your mini call to action, right? The simplest example is there's a passage up there and I can't jump up that high. So that's like a dumb Metroidvania example of passage too high, can't jump, need to find power up. And so that becomes like your mini call to action, and you as the player invent whatever you need to invent in your mind for, like, ooh, I can't wait to see what's up there, or you know what I mean? Like whatever your motivation is. And so that sends you on a journey. You either look at that and go, okay, I can't do it, I give up and never play the game again. Or you go, okay, for what it's like, what's in the box, like I got to find out. And then so you go on your journey to find that thing. And whether you are consciously remembering, okay, this is what I'm doing, I'm going to find that thing. Or whether along the way you just start exploring and you forget, and then you find the thing and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. Now I can do that thing that I couldn't do before. And so that's an instance of that, right? And then that happens again. You get so far and you'll uncover so much of the map, and then you'll get to some other point where it's like, I can't do this thing for some other reason. There's a grapple point here. I'm not meaning to say, say that kind of stuff disparagingly. I really do love them, but there is something just um, like I say, it's a bit too played out sometimes. Um, so then that thing of like, here is a thing that's like a symbol of what I can't do until I can do it, like a grapple point, or a crumbled, semi crumbled wall, that you can use a bomb on later. So that becomes your next like call to action of like, okay, I'm gonna put that in. And then the more of those symbols you see of like, this is obviously a thing that I can't do yet, then you get to know, more and more. And then especially if you play more and more Metroidvanias, you get to understand, okay, this is basically a signifier of the thing that I cannot do yet that relates to some specific thing. And so that was kind of my interesting revelation. And it's sort of as simple as that, is that you end up having multiple calls to action and multiple heroes' journeys. But the end result of each of those sort of micro heroes' journeys of like, I can't do this thing, I need to go on a journey to find the power to do this thing, I bring that power back, and now I can do the thing. And the result is, now I can explore more and find more instances of the thing a next thing that I can't do, so that I repeat that cycle again. And so that is both part of the effective resonance of Metroidvanias, and part of the problem for me is that when you recognize that, it's like, well, you could just repeat that process forever, as far as your imagination can go, in imagining new obstacles and new power-ups to overcome those obstacles. You could just keep it going, and so that's why I wasn't actually meaning to get to this point, talking about this stuff, but that's the conclusion that I'm sort of coming to now, is that's a reason why those bigger arcs need to be more significant. And again, that's not to say I have to have a framing narrative that is better, because I firmly believe that game stories need to be told through gameplay, and that needs to be done better. Like write a narrative and then implement it in gameplay, so that you can sort of erase all the exposition dumps and all of that kind of thing that doesn't work in games, right? Or it's a novel or a film way of doing things that's being shoehorned into games. So when I say like a narrative framing, I'm not sure what that would necessarily mean, because I don't think I've seen it in a Metroidvania, but I mean what I mean is like some kind of bigger gameplay structure. So where you're doing these micro loops of the things that I've been talking about, but then you're doing some kind of macro loop, which might be one or more loops, of some more significant thing that's bringing all those micro loops together, which is more than just get to the end of the game, because that isn't really anything. Every game has get to the end of the game, unless it's a game that has no ending. So yeah, that's ended up being more more critical than I had intended it to be again. But I think it's an interesting area to explore, at least. So the only other thing to add to that is this immersive sim philosophy that I would like to see brought into Metroidvanias more, which is this idea of like, go get the thing to do the thing is the Metroidvania way of doing things, whereas a more immersive sim way of doing things would be, here are some ways that you can do the thing. Like here are several different ways that you can do the thing. Go and explore, and and because then you kind of really mixing that Metroidvania aspect of like, go gather the information, with the very satisfying Metroidvania aspect of go gather the actual things. Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with go collect the stuff, and we get the dopamine hits from collecting a thing in a game, and that's fine, and it can be abused by bad game designers, especially in mobile games. They can just be like getting people addicted to the dopamine hits, but it can be done really well. Like I'm sure that there's a positive reason for why we have that mechanism, why humans have that mechanism, right? I'm sure. I mean, obviously there is a positive reason for it, but it can be abused as well. So I think that's sort of the real conclusion that I'm trying to get to here is, how can we bring that sort of Metroidvania thing that's too closed down on the single solution, and open it more up into like, here is a range of ways to tackle this problem. And any game designers know that it's not just as simple as like, you just flick a switch to change it from one solution to 5 different potential solutions. As soon as you have a range of ways to tackle things, then it becomes much, much more difficult to make sure that players can't just easily like fudge a solution. But I think it's really worth exploring, and then that, to bring it full circle, that then changes the whole aspect of like, here is a labyrinth of the unconscious that I'm delving into, but it is not a prescriptive labyrinth. That's the difference, is like, I can explore it, and it contains my own solutions that I'm creating as I explore it. And that's a powerful thing, right? And that's what Nintendo is doing probably better than anyone else at the moment with, Tears of the Kingdom, and with the new Zelda game where you play as Zelda. They're really leaning into this idea of like player-driven solutions. And there's a lot of immersive sims out there doing it well as well, but most of them are indies, right? Most of them, and it's great, but let's see more people with more funding doing it at higher levels as well. And so then that changes the nature of those little hero's journey loops of here's your call to action and go and find the solution, because then go and find the solution isn't just go to the point that we want you to go to and find the solution that we want you to find. It's much more exploratory and much more creative, because you might find some tools and some resources and some information, and then be applying those on your way back to this thing that you couldn't get through. And you might be having this whole other rich journey along the way. And fun ways of like finding ways to navigate and solve other problems along the way could be like a part of that. And so that's definitely something that I'm trying to explore in my game design, and I know how challenging it can be, but it's also very rewarding. So so I guess that's what I'm here sharing is like, how can we loosen those things up but still really value the resonance of like that Metroidvania stuff, exploring the subconscious. I mean, that's just a wonderful thing that fictions at large can do, that mythology can do, that video games can do, that we can delve into that stuff, and we don't have to put a name to it. we can just say, you know, like Animal World does it. We can just say that we're just it's this mysterious place. We're not going to explain it. It's just like underground caves. It's a lot of darkness and mysteriousness. And that's a wonderful thing to be able to enjoy that resonance. Yeah. So really my intention in analyzing that, or opening up a discussion about it, really is just to see if we can take it further. Yeah. So that's, I guess it's a call, sort of, because I'm not making a Metroidvania myself at the moment. I don't know if I will in the future. But yeah, maybe if you are, you can find ways to sort of loosen it up a bit. All right, so I'll leave it there, and cheers. I'll see you next time.